Hello my dear friends, how are you? Welcome, thank you for joining me here. I'm Mari Thurger, and for the first content of 2025 in this channel, allow me to give a brief introduction to two ancient means of divination. Haruspicy, which was the inspection of sacrificed animals' entrails, and oracle bones, which is what it is. Let me delve straight away into this subject, as I want to try to make more videos which are a little bit more ADHD friendly. But just something quick. I want to thank those who have become my new patrons since the previous video on the future of this channel, my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and a very special thanks obviously to all of my patrons and those who keep watching my works and also listening to my experimental solo music project. Thank you very much for your kindness and support and for your help. Now, at the last months of 2024, last year, I was digging through some works on the Celts, Celt-Iberians and Lusitanians, and when it comes to old forms of magic and divination mostly, the process of seeing the future or making other predictions through animals' entrails is something that pops up quite often in the sources. Sometimes also through the entrails of sacrificed humans, which seems far more vegan-friendly. Of course, this practice wasn't exclusive to Celtic and Celticized peoples, and we don't even know the terms for such practices in Celtic-based languages. There's obviously several ways, several means to go about prophesying things, and our ancestors would see signs in almost everything. But we do have the Latin term Haruspicy, which was a person trained in Haruspicy, as it were, someone who could predict the future by reading omens found in the entrails of animals like sheep and poultry. And much of what we know about this divination method comes from ancient Roman sources, having inherited this tradition from ancient Etruscan religion. The ancient Etruscans have an incredibly developed civilization in the Italic Peninsula before any glimpses of what would become Rome. Among the many magical and religious acts of Etruscan belief systems, Haruspicy was quite popular, very, very popular indeed. It was a practice tracing its origins at least from the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. So, as I said, the Haruspicy was someone trained in the divinatory art of reading omens found in the entrails of sacrificed animals. This was a form to interpret the messages given by the divine. An animal was ritually slaughtered as a sacrifice, butchered, and then the size, shape, color, and markings of the animal's internal organs were examined, primarily the liver, but also the heart and lungs, and then roast the corpse remains to share in a sacred meal with those participating in the ritual, as well as with those present, the celebrants, let's say. The sacrifice usually took place during a ceremony where the sun god could influence the entrails' appearances. Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, was the official sun god of the later Roman Empire and the patron of Roman soldiers. Haruspices, the ones trained in this divinatory art, would charge people to ask a question, to which they would be able to answer a simple yes or no by studying the entrails, considering and balancing the positive and negative omens and seeing which one prevailed. This was not just opening up an animal and looking at the guts. This was taken seriously as divination methods go. It was an elaborate practice, and those in charge of conducting it had to undergo through an extremely specialized training in order to be taken seriously. After this practice was adopted by the Romans, it also became popular with both Christian apostates and other pagans, and continued to be regularly used well into the Middle Ages. Now, an important aspect that stands out in this divinatory method, aside from obviously the use of animals' entrails, is that it wasn't meant to predict future events, not quite, but it was a method of communication with the divine by trying to discern the intention of the gods. As such, by knowing the actions of the gods, one could act upon it in order to maintain the balance between the world of mortals and that of the gods. On oracle bones, very briefly, for those of you with questions regarding the runes and oracle bones, or runes carved on bones to use as a divination method, I've already talked about that on a previous video some years back, divination in pre-Christian Scandinavia. So that one is covered because that question actually pops up quite a lot, mostly by my patrons. So that one has been answered too. On that video, I actually talked about scapulomancy, the practice of divination by use of scapulae or spill bones, shoulder blades, and pyromancy. So let's start with the latter. Pyromancy, or the art of divination by means of fire, was heavily used by people who performed divination in ancient China. Mainly it was a late Shang dynasty thing, specifically scapulomancy and plastromancy, the use of turtle plastrons for divination. These were used as oracle bones. All sorts of questions, but the ones more asked were concerning the weather, crops, military endeavors, and such, and so on and so forth. Well, they would be written on these bones using a sharp tool to carve the questions into pieces of ox scapula and turtle plastron in oracle bone script. In order to receive the answers, they would heat a metal rod and apply it to the bone or shell until it gave way to thermal expansion and cracked. The people reading such signs on the bones were then able to interpret the pattern left by the cracks and record the portents. The great majority of the questions were actually directed at the ancestors. Turtle plastrons, the ventral and belly shells, usually from female turtles, and ox scapulae were primary used for this kind of pyromancy, right? But there were other animal bones, obviously, occasionally also inscribed with questions such as skulls of deer, oxen, and even human skulls. While preparing the oracle bones for use in a divination ceremony, diviners would clean them of flesh and then thoroughly scour them to create a smooth and flat surface. And then pits and hollows were then drilled partway into the bones in rows, which predetermined what kind of cracks would form during the divination process. They would anoint the bones with blood before using ordinals called the heavenly stems and earthly branches to record the date, the diviner's name, and the question itself. After applying a heat source, the cracks were interpreted by the diviner in charge of the whole ceremony, but the way in which they were interpreted is still unknown. So, my dear friends, this is it. Just a little and quick view on these subjects. So let's take it slowly this year, right? Just a little taste for what's coming ahead in other videos. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. And as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.